My name is Jiang Mingyue, and on the night of my wedding to the Prince of Ning, he forced me to make a solemn vow that I would agree to divorce him after 3 years. Prince Xie Qizhou of Ning was a man of mercurial temperament, brooding and cold as winter frost. I dared not speak against him and hastily agreed to his demand. Later, when he became crown prince, as our 3-year agreement neared its end, I ventured to ask tentatively, "When I leave, will you provide me with silver?" He glanced at me with those penetrating eyes and replied coolly, "Yes." I pressed further, "What about shops? Or perhaps a residence?" Suddenly he smiled, a dangerous, knowing smile, and countered, "Have you ever considered not divorcing me at all? That way everything I possess would become yours." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper, "Including myself." The day I proposed traveling to Linyan, Xie Qizhou had just returned from the imperial palace. He was preoccupied with urgent matters and showed no inclination to hear me out completely. Thus, I had barely uttered half a sentence when his expression turned glacial, his voice sharp with impatience. "What business could you possibly have in Linnan at a time like this? Stay in the manor where you belong and cease this restless wandering." My words caught in my throat as I looked upon him. Here stood my husband, a man who had solved countless intricate cases since taking his position in the Ministry of Justice, feared yet respected by all. His perception was razor-sharp, his judgments infallible. Yet this same man could not discern how deeply worried and unsettled his princess consort was at this very moment. I recalled the letter I had received just moments before, my emotions churning as I spoke again. "I am not being unreasonable. It's simply that my mother's health has taken another turn for the worse, and I wish to visit her in Linnan." At that precise moment, an urgent voice called from nearby. "Your Highness, someone from the Su residence has arrived, claiming urgent business with you." Xie Qizhou's brow furrowed, his expression growing grave. He studied me for a long moment, as if on the verge of saying something, but in the end managed only, "Whatever matters you have can wait until my return." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away. His departing figure was resolute, his crimson robes billowing magnificently behind him, handsome and commanding, as if he would never pause for anyone's sake. Yet I knew the truth. Prime Minister Su was his mentor, and Miss Su Wanro, the Prime Minister's third daughter, was his childhood companion. They shared deep connections. Though I had been his wife for over 2 years, I remained forever an outsider, destined to be abandoned. Never before had I understood so clearly that the man I believed incapable of earthly affections, this lofty, untouchable figure, had long ago willingly entered the realm of romance for another. I had simply refused to acknowledge it. With this realization, I no longer watched his retreating form. Instead, I quietly prepared a horse for myself, intending to depart under cover of night. Since marrying into the Prince of Ning's manor, I had maintained careful propriety to win Xie Qizhou's favor, never daring to step out of line. But now I was weary. If he would not consent to my journey, so be it. Upon his return, I would initiate our divorce proceedings myself. My departure from the capital proceeded smoothly until my turn came at the city gates, when suddenly a carriage arrived, one bearing the Prime Minister's seal. The gate guards dared not detain it and prepared to grant passage immediately. From within came a soft, gentle voice saying, "My thanks." I had heard that voice several times before. It belonged to Su Wanro. As I turned to look, a breeze lifted the carriage curtain at just the right moment, revealing Xie Qizhou seated inside, eyes closed in apparent rest. Ah, so this was the urgent business that occupied him. I felt grateful that I had not heeded his words to wait for him at the manor. What purpose would there be in waiting for someone who would never return? He seemed to sense something suddenly, opening his eyes just as the curtain fell. I had no time to spare for him and rode directly through the gates, leaving that carriage far behind. Little did I know that after my departure, Shichizhou grew increasingly restless, summoning his hidden guard. Return to the manor immediately and observe what the princess consort is doing. Upon reaching Lin'an, I hastened directly to the Zhang family residence. Contrary to my expectations, my mother was not confined to her sickbed at all. She appeared quite healthy, pulling me into her embrace with tears of both joy and sorrow as she asked, "Why have you returned?" I mentioned the letter I had received. My father laughed from nearby. When we sent that letter, she was indeed unwell. But half a month ago, a physician arrived from the capital, a man of extraordinary skill. After just a few doses of his medicine, your mother recovered considerably. I quite forgot to send word of this good news. The weight upon my heart finally lifted. I remained in Lin'an for several days. On the third day, I began packing for my return journey. That very day, servants from the prince's manor arrived at the Zhang residence, reporting that upon Xie Qizhou's return to the manor, he had punished all the servants in my courtyard. They claimed he had originally intended to come personally, but had been detained by urgent matters. I found this rather astonishing. He intended to come find me? Surely that was false. These days, servants would say anything to complete their duties satisfactorily. When I departed, my parents saw me off at the gate. Perhaps sensing something amiss, they obliquely mentioned the Wang family's elder daughter, who had recently divorced the Fu family. By current social standards, she was a discarded wife, rejected by her husband's family, yet not welcomed back by her own. She now worked alone in a noodle shop as a kitchen helper, living in great hardship. Yet I had heard she was once a renowned young lady of the city, Lin'an's most accomplished musician. I nodded, assuring them, "I understand everything." My parents, understanding well the difficulties of being an imperial daughter-in-law, had requested the emperor's permission shortly after my marriage to Xie Qizhou to serve in a distant post, bringing them to Lin'an. At that time, the struggle for succession among the princes had become quite apparent. It was during one such conflict that Xie Qizhou fell from favor, earning the emperor's displeasure. In his imperial wrath, the Son of Heaven had impulsively betrothed me to him, while under the influence of wine. My father held the rank of fifth-grade minister. Before this arrangement, my marriage prospects had all been young gentlemen of comparable family standing. Who could have foreseen that through sudden change of fortune, I would become Princess of Ning? For Xie Qizhou, however, this represented a humiliation. My existence virtually severed his path to advantageous political alliances through marriage. Therefore, on our wedding night, after lifting my bridal veil, he spoke with startling directness. "Make a vow that you will willingly divorce me after 3 years. During this period, I will not consummate our marriage, and you must not develop feelings for me." His words could not have been more blunt. Having learned I was to marry him, I had made inquiries about this Prince of Ning, discovering his reputation for coldness and decisive action. In such circumstances, with his expression frightfully stern, I dared not protest and stammered out the required vow. By the following day, I regretted my compliance entirely. Though I could not claim noble birth, I had studied the 4 books and 5 classics since childhood and was universally praised as the accomplished daughter of the Zhang family. Why should I be obligated to heed his demand for divorce? If this marriage displeased him, did he imagine I had entered into it with joy and enthusiasm? As for that vow, he had forced me to make it. It did not spring from my true heart. Moreover, it is said that a gentleman's word is his bond. But I was no gentleman. My nature tended toward determination rather than submission. I refused to be looked down upon merely due to supposed differences in family status, then willingly agreed to divorce. Therefore, I began earnestly learning how to become a competent and appealing princess consort. I told myself I must not fear him. I began diligently managing the inner household, winning people's loyalty, personally sewing his garments, and preparing his meals with my own hands. As time passed, I found myself genuinely caring for him. I possessed sufficient beauty and patience. I intended to move his heart and make him regret his hasty judgment. Only later did I realize that not all efforts yield favorable results. I discovered he already had a childhood companion of appropriate social standing. He was not truly cold and unfeeling. He possessed a gentle side that emerged in her presence when he would smile, patiently accompanying her to view the moon and celebrate the Lantern Festival. I cannot recall the exact day, but it was during my first birthday celebration after our marriage. He left me to entertain guests alone in the manor, earning the sympathy of servants and the mockery of visitors. I represented his unsuitable match, the most unseemly aspect of his brilliant future prospects. From the beginning, he never considered my circumstances. After 3 years, when I divorced him and became a princess consort spurned by the imperial family, how would I survive? He had merely calculated a temporary period he could tolerate, 3 years sufficient for him to exercise patience, while plotting his ascension to power, then discard me. I returned to the capital on a day of heavy snow, leading my horse on foot, my robes laden with accumulated snowflakes. Upon reaching the gates of the Prince of Ning's manor, I discovered the normally secured entrance standing wide open, with a figure holding a lantern in the courtyard, watching me intently. He wore formal court robes of deep crimson, his bearing magnificent, while his other hand held a thick cloak. Against the backdrop of moonlight and shadows, he appeared less forbidding than usual. He spoke to me simply, "Come here." I remained motionless, no longer offering him the smiles I once gave so freely. His brow creased slightly, yet he did not rebuke me. Instead, seeming to sense something unusual in my demeanor, he asked hesitantly, "What troubles you?" In all our years as husband and wife, this was the first time he had shown such concern for my well-being. Yet my heart could summon no joy at this gesture. I passed by him and walked toward my courtyard. He followed in silence, several times attempting to drape the cloak over my shoulders, only to have me refuse each overture. When we reached my courtyard entrance, his patience finally broke. "Stop!" he commanded. I halted and turned to face him. He demanded, "You departed without word or explanation. Will you not account for this behavior? Do you have any idea how worried I was?" I finally smiled, my words carrying an unfamiliar edge. "Explain what? You and Su Wanrou, alone together in the deep of night, departing the city. Did I demand explanations from you?" His expression showed momentary shock as he realized I had indeed witnessed him at the city gates that night. I gazed at him steadily, awaiting his customary rebuke for my presumption. In the past, whenever I overstepped or acted beyond my station, he would fix me with that stern look and say coldly, "Must I remind you to recognize your proper place?" His temperament was unpredictable and arrogant beyond measure. Such harsh words were not unusual from him, nor would they particularly wound or disappoint me. At least not before I learned he did not treat everyone with such severity. I had once witnessed him tenderly retrieving Su Wanrou's dropped handkerchief from the ground, I remembered, though I could not recall exactly when. Yet, in the next moment, he spoke entirely different words. "I can provide an explanation." His voice carried a weighted quality, tinged with something almost desperate. I stared in amazement before shaking my head. "There is no need. I understand my position clearly now. Such matters are not for me to hear." His expression gradually grew more somber. As I moved toward my courtyard, I found myself inexplicably recalling his unusual forbearance tonight. Ordinarily, he would have lost his temper long ago. He controlled the Ministry of Justice, possessed countless methods for dealing with criminals, and had always been absolutely authoritative within the manor. Anyone who erred received appropriate punishment. Had he chosen to hold me accountable for leaving the capital without permission as his princess consort, I could not have escaped consequences. Only then did I realize something peculiar about his behavior. Turning back for another look, I saw Zichizhou still standing there, his features obscured by night shadows, making his expression difficult to discern. Yet in that moment, I detected something resembling defeat in his bearing. This recognition filled me with an odd excitement. Previously, I had always deferred to him. Now I suddenly wondered what he might look like in a state of genuine fury. Among all human emotions, surely I deserved to witness at least one after wasting more than 2 years of my life on him. Thus I smiled suddenly, meeting his gaze directly as I spoke with deliberate provocation. "Your Highness, that day at the manor gates you were quite harsh with me. I had barely begun to speak when you—" His tightly furrowed brow suddenly relaxed. "I can explain that day's events as well." I paid little attention to his words, instead letting my eyes fill with tears at precisely the right moment, gazing up at him with calculated vulnerability. "Never mind, Your Highness. These are trivial matters. There is only one thing that has weighed constantly on my mind. Would you be willing to grant me this one request? First show weakness, then make demands. In former times, I would have thought myself mad to employ such tactics. Yet tonight, his unexpected yielding had emboldened me considerably. As they say, when a person faces death, their words become kind. Having reached this point of resolution, ready to depart, I decided to be kind just once." Zichizhou nodded without hesitation. "Speak your mind." "So readily?" The snow had stopped, leaving only frost-white ground in its wake. Never before had I felt such calm and freedom in his presence. With something approaching malicious playfulness, I declared, "I want you to consummate our marriage." As my words settled between us, even one as composed and self-controlled as Zichizhou could not help but freeze in place. His initial expression was one of pure shock. I continued gazing at him through my tears, watching his look transform into something questioning and strange. After a long moment, as if suddenly returning to his senses, his lantern and cloak crashed to the ground with jarring noise. He stared at me unblinkingly, his eyes dark and intense, before speaking in a voice that seemed to seek confirmation, each word carefully enunciated. "You are serious?" My tears ceased, my lashes trembling involuntarily. Looking at this stern man standing before me, I thought, this was not at all how I had imagined things would unfold. He was supposed to maintain his chastity for love's sake. Hearing such words from me should have provoked thunderous rage, anger, or an immediate departure. I felt utterly confused, certain that something had gone terribly wrong. In the past, if he had asked me such a question, I would have nodded joyfully and confirmed my sincerity. But this time, I truly was not being serious. So after he spoke those words, I fled in panic, completely disregarding what expression might cross his face or how he might view my behavior. I needed to begin planning for my own future. Before leaving Linyan, my parents' veiled warnings had not been mere threats. As an imperial daughter-in-law seeking divorce, my fate would only be more miserable. Previously, because I cared for Zichizhou, I had refused his suggestions. Whenever he mentioned divorce, I would become distressed and then reflect on my own shortcomings. Perhaps 18 months ago, he had once asked me, "Are you familiar with the top imperial examination graduate? This man is quite handsome, from an honorable family, extremely talented, and destined for great advancement if nothing goes amiss. After our divorce, should you be interested, I would personally arrange the match." Naturally, his offer was not sincere. Why would he genuinely consider my welfare? What prompted such words was merely his irritation at my constant sewing of new garments for him. At that time, his gaze held weariness and mockery, but no trace of tenderness. He knew I would panic and cease bothering him temporarily. That was his sole objective. One as lofty as the Prince of Ning had always taken pleasure in toying with others. Yet now I truly wished to discuss this matter with him seriously. Admittedly, some people possess such devious natures that even their casual jests might prove excellent suggestions. However, before seeking him out, I felt some trepidation. A night had passed. He had surely comprehended the situation by now. When we met, we would have two accounts to settle: my unauthorized departure from the capital and my audacious demand the previous night that he consummate our marriage. Unfortunately, all my carefully planned explanations went unused. Xie Qizhou had departed for Nanyang to investigate a case, reportedly leaving in the night with no definite return date. Before I could feel disappointed at this news, another matter demanded my attention. The palace summoned me. Consort Li's headaches had returned, and my presence was requested. I understood this was not truly about providing care, but rather receiving criticism. She would resent my humble family background for hindering her son's prospects and reproach me for failing to bear children or arrange concubines for Xie Qizhou during our marriage. The list of grievances was endless. Therefore, I declined to enter the palace, instructing the messenger to inform the eunuch that I was ill and unable to leave my bed. Though the eunuch harbored suspicions, he asked no questions before departing. After all, I had always been so obedient and compliant. Whenever summoned to any task, I never uttered a word of refusal. No one would suspect me of feigning illness. I decided to embrace complete indolence, ceasing all management of manor affairs. Stacks of account books arrived at my quarters only to be returned untouched. Except for my personal attendants, everyone believed I had truly fallen ill. I monitored news of Xie Qizhou's situation constantly, planning to recover just before his return so we could settle our divorce arrangements. After that, neither Consort Li nor the Su family would have any connection to me. This charade continued for more than 10 days. I had envisioned everything proceeding smoothly, but I never anticipated Xie Qizhou's sudden return. He arrived while I was already asleep, my complexion rosy with health, deep in pleasant dreams. His return was so precipitous that my attendants had no opportunity to warn me. They could only watch helplessly as he burst through my chamber door, his voice trembling with urgent panic. "Jiang Mingyu, I heard you." His words came rapidly, carried by wind that seemed to crash against my ears. I sat up drowsily from sleep, meeting his gaze directly, nearly crying out in alarm. Moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating my sleeping robe embroidered with crabapple blossoms and the travel-dusty hem of his garments. Upon seeing me, Xie Qizhou's words died abruptly. He stared at me, his gaze holding an indescribable quality, then seemed to exhale with relief before his ears actually reddened with embarrassment. I was the one caught red-handed feigning illness, yet he appeared more flustered than I was. This was decidedly unlike Xie Qizhou's usual demeanor. After a long pause, he seemed to recover his voice, saying curtly, "Dress yourself properly." I looked down to discover my sleeping robe had indeed become disheveled during sleep. I hastily adjusted my garments while Xie Qizhou watched my movements before suddenly asking, "You are not actually ill?" His tone carried absolute certainty. I stared in confusion, unable to comprehend how he could have returned so quickly when just this evening I had received word that the situation remained complex and his return was indefinitely delayed. I replied honestly, "No, I am not." I no longer harbored hope of maintaining any pretense of gentle virtue before him. "Your mother summoned me to the palace, but I had no desire to go. I have grown weary of managing your household affairs and no longer wish to continue. We are not truly husband and wife. What fault could there be in my behavior?" Since we had never truly been intimate, Why should I manage his household and serve his mother? As my words concluded, Xie figure stiffened. He watched me with prolonged silence, his gaze profound, while his steady breathing became irregular. Quite suddenly, I sensed something amiss and quickly turned my head away, not daring to look at him further. From his perspective, such behavior might not represent confrontation or defiance. I was attempting to win his favor. He had long known of my feelings for him. Before his departure, I had tearfully begged him, declaring my desire for physical intimacy, but without success. Now I was feigning illness, trying to earn his sympathy and persuade him to reconsider, to become my true husband. With this realization, only one thought filled my mind: regret, deep and genuine regret. Surely Xie was both furious and angry now. He despised when others employed schemes against him. Yet when I gathered courage to meet his eyes, I found myself looking into eyes filled with mirth. He said, "There is nothing wrong with that. If you find these duties unpleasant, then abandon them." I stared in shock. As he prepared to continue speaking, a soft knock came from outside. "Your Highness, the hour grows late. Shall we still depart?" Shichijo's smile faded slightly as he drew a deep breath, then suddenly leaned down to embrace me firmly. Wait for my return. I remained frozen in bewilderment. So he truly had not finished his urgent business. Why had he made this hasty return? Most strangely, after Zichijo's second departure, he began sending me letters. Despite his busy schedule, his ambitious nature, and his unfinished grand designs, he found time to inquire about my favorite sweets and whether I wished to see fireflies. Though I had not yet obtained what I desired from him and could not afford to break relations completely, I responded to his correspondence. Whatever he asked, I answered, though I felt too weary for elaborate replies while he seemed inexhaustibly enthusiastic. On one occasion, I calculated strategically, adding an extra comment to express how quickly 3 years had passed, noting that only 5 months remained until our agreed divorce date. I assumed he would appreciate this reminder. When pleased, he might prove more amenable to my future requests upon his return. However, after sending that letter, he ceased all correspondence for an extended period. I had not anticipated this would be our final exchange. Indeed, it was our last, because he never returned from Nanyang. He had disappeared. Shichiju was such a prominently ambitious man that his presence had long overshadowed his brother's prospects. Now everything changed. News of his disappearance reached the capital, instantly altering the political landscape. Those who sought to kick him while down were numerous, with Prince Su's faction being particularly aggressive in their machinations. I began entering the palace regularly to attend Consort Li. When a person suffers unexpected misfortune, the one who grieves most deeply is invariably their mother. Consort Li had previously been difficult and demanding, constantly complaining of various ailments, but now she had recovered from all her troubles. She marshaled her strength to send search parties to Nanyang while tearfully pleading before the emperor, recounting Zichijo's years of faithful service and hardship. Meanwhile, I resumed socializing among the wives of noble families. Zichijo's disappearance was certainly no simple matter. Though these women remained in their inner quarters, they were not necessarily ignorant of important affairs. After some time, Consort Li and I had actually developed a bond forged through shared adversity. Who could have predicted such a thing? Nevertheless, she continued her complaints, saying how beneficial it would have been if I had borne Zichijo a child, and declaring that should Zichijo return safely this time, she would insist he take 10 or more concubines, regardless of our feelings on the matter. Occasionally, she would also suggest I leave promptly. I was in the flower of my youth, and accompanying her in the palace served no purpose. More importantly, the next crown prince would never spare our lives. I did not depart. What sense would there be in my leaving now? Sometimes I would wake from nightmares, thinking that if he were dead, I might have to remain a widow for life. This detestable man, even in disappearing, even in dying, why could he not wait until after our divorce? I truly had no desire to become a widow. I was still waiting to claim wealth and security from him, so I conceived the notion of traveling personally to Nanyang to search for him. However, I never had the opportunity to execute this plan. That very night, Prince Su launched a palace coup, throwing the manor into chaos both within and without. I could only set aside my hastily packed belongings and step forward to steady people's hearts. I told them that anyone wishing to leave was free to do so. I would not prevent their departure. In the flickering firelight, the clash of weapons reached into everyone's souls. Success and failure followed such simple rules, and I felt profound melancholy rise in my heart. Would Jie ever return? If I truly died here, how heartbroken my parents would be. Yet at that very moment, a low, hoarse laugh sounded behind me. And what of you? Do you wish to leave? I turned to see someone in armor, wielding a sword, his face still marked with fresh blood. I stared at him speechlessly while Zichizhou smiled gently, opening his arms toward me. Come, let me see you. Zichizhou had fought his way back to the capital. He had achieved fame in his youth and harbored great ambitions. Everything he did served his goal of claiming the throne. Yet at this moment, only at this moment, gazing at the young woman before him, something called tenderness bloomed in his heart. No one knew that when surrounded and facing life-or-death circumstances in Nanyang, his thoughts had not turned to his unfulfilled lifelong aspirations, but rather to the fact that he had not yet replied to his princess consort's letter. He wanted to tell her that through their daily interactions, he had long since regretted forcing her to make that vow. He cared for her too. They were mutually attracted. If he could escape this predicament, he would surely make her his true wife. Jie Qizhou's arrival brought relief to everyone, but he could not remain at the manor indefinitely. He had more pressing matters to attend to, leaving a guard unit to protect the residents. I waited through the night in my chambers. As dawn approached, everything finally settled. Jie Qizhou had emerged victorious, but the emperor had fallen gravely ill due to the upheaval and was confined to his bed. Before losing consciousness, he issued a single imperial edict, establishing Jie Qizhou as crown prince to manage state affairs in his stead. Mountains of memorials descended upon him, forcing Jie Qizhou to reside in the palace. His personal guards came to see me, obliquely inquiring whether I might wish to enter the palace to bring him provisions. Only then did I learn that during these recent days, while Jie Qizhou deliberated with court ministers, sometimes until very late, other officials received caring attention and soup from their wives. But he alone had no one. Perhaps he did receive such care. Consort Li resided in the palace, and he had returned safely from near death. How could she not be concerned for him? Moreover, as crown prince, countless young women would willingly offer their hearts and compete for his attention. Nevertheless, I allowed myself to be persuaded, though not from genuine concern for him. I simply felt certain matters could no longer be postponed. If something else befell him, would I not again worry about potential widowhood? The following day, I personally prepared lotus seed soup and entered the palace. When I arrived, Jie Qizhou had not yet finished his duties. I waited in a pavilion, but before long, the door opened and ministers began emerging. They passed through the courtyard, unable to see me seated within, though I could hear their conversation clearly. What came over His Highness today, the past few days? Which session ended before the fourth watch? This time, we were dismissed much earlier. Someone clicked their tongue. You fail to understand. Earlier, someone apparently arrived, and after Eunuch Liu delivered a message, His Highness became somewhat distracted. Surely he was eager to meet with someone. My heart skipped slightly. Could that someone be me? When most had departed, I rose to approach his quarters, but just as I prepared to enter, someone walked toward me, nearly causing a collision. I looked up to see a man in scarlet official robes, with upright features that clearly marked him as a righteous gentleman, someone entirely unlike Shichizhou. This person was obviously intelligent, immediately understanding the situation and bowing respectfully. "Your Highness." I was about to offer a polite smile when another voice interrupted, carrying a note of displeasure. "Did you not come to bring me something? Enter quickly." April had arrived, bringing rich spring atmosphere to the carved railings and painted buildings. I looked toward the man within the hall who was staring at the food container in my hands, his eyes showing pleasure, though restrained, as he also harbored some jealousy over his princess consort standing with another man. Only then did I realize he had not referred to himself as this prince for quite some time. The hall doors closed with a bang, and all palace maids and eunuchs retreated. Shichizhou looked at me, asking somewhat awkwardly, "What did you prepare?" I asked him. "I have made all your favorite dishes for you before. So, Shichizhou, can you guess what I would prepare for you on such weather, after you have labored for many days?" Shichizhou pressed his lips together, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. Since he had never even looked at my previous offerings, much less tasted them, how could he possibly know what they contained? After a long pause, he asked hoarsely, "Bird's nest soup?" I smiled. I had no idea how to prepare bird's nest soup. Seeing my expression, he immediately knew his guess was wrong and changed the subject. "Mother has spoken of you frequently these past days, saying how grateful she was for your companionship during that difficult time." I replied, "It was my duty." I then opened the food container. "Please drink it while it's still warm." He accepted the bowl and drank slowly, very carefully. I considered my words before speaking. "Well, we are approaching our agreed date." His spoon paused as he looked up at me. "Yes, but I continued without acknowledging his interruption. "You previously mentioned arranging a match between me and that top graduate." Shichizhou set down his bowl, staring at me intently before glancing toward the tightly closed doors. "What do you mean?" "A single encounter, one respectful greeting." Shichizhou seemed suddenly struck by realization, falling silent and still. I understood immediately the man I had just met was indeed the examination graduate he had mentioned previously. Of course, his original words had been spoken in jest, but now I intended to be shameless and take them seriously. I said, "You remember, don't you? Those were your exact words, but I no longer desire that arrangement. What I want now is much simpler and should benefit you greatly." Shichizhou appeared to relax slightly, regarding me with measured calm as he asked, "Oh? Tell me what that might be." "After our divorce, grant me the title of county princess." His brow furrowed slightly. I had thought this through carefully. Only with such status could I live well. With the current crown prince's formal recognition, who would dare remember that I had once been his divorced wife? Seeing his silence, I pressed my advantage, asking tentatively, "When I leave, will you provide me with silver?" He glanced at me with something resembling gritted teeth, yet forced out an acknowledgement. "Yes," I continued. "What about shops? Or perhaps a residence?" Suddenly he smiled. "Have you ever considered not divorcing me at all? That way, everything I possess would become yours." I looked at him with some surprise. "Ah, what do you mean by that?" Before I could fully comprehend his words, he suddenly leaned closer, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper, "Including myself." My heartstrings trembled slightly. Yes, I was neither blind nor senseless. I could see he now seemed to harbor some feelings for me. Yet I had never imagined that one so proud as he would actively humble himself to say such things to me. I was caught completely off guard. He pursued his advantage relentlessly. "If you do not divorce me, I can offer you even more. To be empress of the realm, beloved above all others. Xie Qizhou's eyes lowered as he released a long sigh. Wealth and status, fame and power, these had once been his greatest desires, and now he had obtained them all. Yet somehow speaking of them now felt hollow and insufficient. Finally, he fixed his gaze on me with something approaching supplication. I care for you, Mingyu. Throughout his life, he had rarely spoken with such humility. Even when first realizing his feelings, his temperament had remained stubborn and harsh. The most gentle words he had managed were, "Wait for my return," delivered without warmth, frightening me away. Indeed, I thought, Xie Qizhou had likely never spoken soft words to anyone. Even his declaration of affection was delivered matter-of-factly. Yet compared to his former manner, this represented immeasurable improvement. But if he truly cared for me, what of Su Wanro? She had retrieved his handkerchief, accompanied him during the Lantern Festival, traveled with him from the city in the dead of night. What did all that signify? I had once lain sleepless over these incidents, weeping in distress. Could his simple declaration of affection now erase all of that? With these thoughts, I voiced my questions aloud. After my words settled, Xie Qizhou actually appeared stunned. He had never considered these matters seriously, and found himself somewhat tongue-tied. I held no romantic feelings for her whatsoever. You know that my sole focus was the succession struggle. My actions had nothing to do with matters of the heart. He explained the circumstances of those occasions, meetings with the Prime Minister that could not be conducted openly, and a handkerchief containing intelligence from his agents operating through the Su household. After his explanations, I believed him. My previous feelings for him had clouded my judgment, but now, observing with detachment and hearing his clarifications, I suddenly understood. Given his nature, if he truly cared for someone, he would surely have made it known throughout the capital. There would be far more evidence than these few incidents. Finally, he added, "If you still doubt me, I will. Summon him to confirm my words." I shook my head, looking at him steadily. "Xie Qizhou, what if I told you I no longer care for you, and that is why I wish to divorce you?" He fell silent, his face growing pale. We parted on this discordant note, with me returning to the manor to await divorce papers. I assumed someone so prideful would never again speak of caring for me after hearing such words, yet first came news that Su Wanro was to be betrothed. Her family had supported Xie Qizhou's rise to power and now enjoyed elevated status accordingly. Though her intended was merely a fourth-rank official, I knew Xie Qizhou valued him highly and would surely entrust him with important responsibilities in the future. Others remained unaware of my impending divorce from Xie Qizhou, assuming my position as crown princess was assured. At the betrothal banquet, I was immediately surrounded by people offering flattery and seeking favor, saying exactly what I wished to hear. Halfway through the festivities, Su Wanro suddenly drew me aside, asking with obvious embarrassment, "I heard you believed the crown prince harbored feelings for me?" I nodded. Xie Qizhou had indeed sent someone to explain matters to me. She clicked her tongue softly, whispering, "How could that be possible? He's such a terrifying figure. I trembled just being near him. You cannot imagine. Once when father had me provide cover for his departure from the city, sitting in the same carriage, I was shaking with fear. The moment we left the gates, he mounted his horse and rode away without speaking a single word to me. This was something I had not known, though it seemed I was not the only one initially frightened of him. I smiled slightly. "I understand everything now. Thank you," she continued. "I always thought he would never develop feelings for any woman. Sister Zhang, how did you manage it?" I could not explain, because he had indeed once despised me. However, I had rarely interacted closely with Miss Su before and had not realized she was such a talkative person. She asked me many questions, finally reaching a conclusion. Truly, beautiful women are the downfall of heroes. No matter how steely one's heart, after sufficient time, who can remain unmoved by a bowl of soup, a new garment, or gentle, caring words? 2 days later, I went to see Consort Li, intending to take the opportunity to gauge Xie Qizhou's intentions. But she detained me, once again raising the subject of selecting concubines for him. Previously, she would speak her mind carelessly and then lecture me, expecting me to take active responsibility for arrangements. Since Xie Qizhou had avoided trouble by placing this burden on me from the start, claiming he had no desire for concubines and would only accept them with my approval, and given his attitude, coupled with my feelings for him at the time, I had naturally gone along with his wishes, playing the villain by feigning ignorance. But now, after speaking her piece, Consort Li seemed concerned about hurting my feelings and added, "Mingyu, what are your thoughts on this matter? I naturally wish to perform one final good deed before departing. Xie Qizhou would eventually become emperor. How could he manage with no women around him?" My attitude became enthusiastic. "Does Mother have preferred candidates? I would be happy to help with careful selection." Consort Li had come prepared, producing a stack of portraits from nearby. However, before we had examined them long, she developed a headache. Soon an imperial physician arrived, and after a few needle treatments, Consort Li felt much better. I glanced at the physician, finding him somehow familiar. I had seen this man during my return to Linyan. He was the doctor from the capital that my father had mentioned. After the physician's departure, I casually inquired, "I do not recall seeing that physician before." "That is an expert His Majesty summoned from the Medicine King Valley. About 6 months ago, the emperor brought him to the capital, provided excellent accommodation and meals for several days, then sent him away, saying someone was gravely ill. He only recently returned, having taken an interest in the palace medical supplies and agreed to treat my headaches." A breeze drifted in from outside the hall as I looked up with sudden understanding. So that was how it was. A certain someone had never mentioned this to me. Consort Li, holding the portraits, began discussing them excitedly again. "What do you think of this one? And this one?" I found myself losing interest, glancing only cursorily. "They seem fine. She appears good-natured. Qizhou should find her appealing. Perhaps not. Winning his affection seems rather difficult." Lost in thought, I was unaware I had spoken aloud until the announcement of a eunuch interrupted us. Xie Qizhou had arrived. His figure appeared at the intersection of palace lanterns, obscured and indistinct, though his robes billowed dramatically in the wind flowing from outside. I wondered how long he had been standing there. He smiled charmingly, beckoning to me, his gaze dangerous. What manner of beauty requires my examination? The hall doors closed with a resounding bang as palace maids and eunuchs withdrew completely. Consort Li laughed heartily, gathering all the scrolled portraits to her chest. "Oh my, I am feeling unwell again, and must rest." How could I fail to recognize the palace women's skill at reading situations? I straightened, regarding him with deliberate slowness. "Oh, since I am to depart soon, I thought I should make arrangements for your future before leaving." Xie Qizhou's cold laugh carried a sharp edge as he tilted my chin upward. "Do you believe I require such arrangements?" Through this contact, I felt distinctly the jade thumb ring he habitually wore, that hard, cold ring now pressed against the skin beneath my jaw, sending chills through me. I remained speechless for a long moment before he spoke again, his voice low and commanding. "Jiang Mingyu, speak." When angered, he bore resemblance to his former self, the forbidding Prince of Ning. I found myself uncertain what to say, and the atmosphere grew heavy with silence. His expression suddenly turned sorrowful as he spoke with earnest gravity. "I have reflected extensively these past days, and must admit my arrogance and stupidity led to my previous treatment of you, but I can now swear to you that henceforth you will be my only companion. I will never harbor divided loyalties. When I was missing and facing possible death, you could have departed but chose to remain. What do you fear now?" He rarely revealed his inner thoughts so openly, his words carrying a certain stiffness. Indeed, what did I fear? Nothing more than offering my heart without receiving response in kind. During those hopeless days, he had nearly made me forget how confidently I had once believed in my own worth, that I was capable of anything, including capturing a man's heart. And now I had indeed succeeded, had I not. He was the most handsome and powerful man I had ever encountered, and I had once felt certain I could stand as his equal. Shichijo began pursuing me with unwavering determination. The manor's inhabitants were first to notice something unusual. They observed their esteemed crown prince constantly seeking reasons to change residences, complaining that the porcelain here was inadequately arranged or that there was an extra roof tile there. Most frequently, he claimed fear of living alone. After sufficient time, who could fail to see his desire to move into the ladies' courtyard? I grew weary of his pretenses yet felt helpless. After all, I had promised him another chance that day. Truly, within imperial palaces surrounded by gleaming gold, one easily lost their way. Wealth indeed dazzled the eyes. So when he once again claimed fear of rain collapsing his courtyard, I replied calmly, "There is no need for such concerns. We will be moving to the Eastern Palace soon." He forced a slight smile, his voice strained. "Indeed," I smiled back. "I will live there with you. No need to fear." Unprepared for such words, his face lit up with genuine delight, taking on an almost dangerously alluring quality, as if deliberately attempting to seduce someone. I dared not look further and hurried away. Shichijo remained standing in place for a considerable time, so long that a hidden guard, believing something had happened, appeared to ask, "Your Highness, what captures your attention?" I gaze upon the flourishing blossoms in my palm, the bright moon within my heart.